A number of years ago, I listened to a series of lectures given by Dr. J. Rufus Fears. The title of the series was Books That Have Made History, Books That Can Change Your Life. Dr. Fears was a professor of history and literary classics at the University of Oklahoma. One lecture in particular in this series was on the Gospel of Mark. Dr. Fears said that Jesus, according to the Gospel of Mark, was a prophet, a great moral teacher, somewhat of a revolutionary in his teachings and the things that he advocated. And of course, he was also the founder of one of the world's great religions, Christianity. Dr. Fears likened Jesus to Moses, who was also considered a prophet of God and the founder of one of the world's great religions, Judaism, and to Muhammad, who is also considered a prophet of God and the founder of one of the world's great religions, Islam. Jesus, like many of God's prophets, in the end was martyred for his teaching, for his revolutionary ideas. So Dr. Fears would summarize Jesus' life or who Jesus was in this way. Jesus was a great prophet, a moral teacher. He was the founder of one of the world's great religions. He would say that what's most important then about Jesus is his teaching and the example of his life. And Dr. Fears would suggest from the title of his lecture series that if you study his teachings, that if you follow Jesus' life, the example of his life, it will change your life. What I want to suggest to you is that Dr. Fears was right in one way, but not completely right. It is true that Jesus was a prophet, a teacher, the founder of a religion, but he was much more than that. And the thing that is interesting is that we'll see who Jesus really is by looking at his death, by considering his death. We've been looking at John's Gospel, or we have in the past, and we've come to chapter 19, verses 16 through 37. That's where John talks about the crucifixion of Jesus. And the question I want you to think about is, why did Jesus die? Let me read this passage for you. So they took Jesus away. That is, now we're coming in and Pilate has sentenced him to death. And so they've taken him away. They torture him and they're ready to crucify him. So they took Jesus away. Carrying the cross by himself, he went to the place called Place of the Skull, in Hebrew, Golgotha. There they nailed him to the cross. 2 others were crucified with him, one on either side, with Jesus between them. And Pilate posted a sign on the cross that read, Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. The place where Jesus was crucified was near the city, and the sign was written in Hebrew, Latin, and Greek, so that many people could read it. Then the leading priest objected and said to Pilate, change it from the King of the Jews to, he said, I am the King of the Jews. Pilate replied, no, what I have written, I have written. When the soldiers had crucified Jesus, they divided his clothes among the 4 of them. They also took his robe, but it was seamless, woven in one piece from top to bottom. So they said, rather than tearing it apart, let's throw dice for it. This fulfilled the scripture that says, they divided my garments among themselves and threw dice for my clothing. So that was what they did. Standing near the cross were Jesus' mother and his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother standing there beside the disciple he loved, he said to her, dear woman, here is your son. And he said to this disciple, here is your mother. And from then on, this disciple took her into his home. Jesus knew that his mission was now finished. And to fulfill Scripture, he said, "I am thirsty." A jar of sour wine was sitting there, and so they soaked a sponge in it, put it on a hyssop branch, and held it up to his lips. When Jesus had tasted it, he said, "It is finished." Then he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. It was the day of preparation, and the Jewish leaders didn't want the bodies hanging there the next day, which was the Sabbath, a very special Sabbath because it was Passover week. So they asked Pilate to hasten their deaths by ordering that their legs be broken. Then their bodies could be taken down. So the soldiers came and broke the legs of the two men crucified with Jesus. But when they came to Jesus, they saw that he was already dead, so they didn't break his legs. One of the soldiers, however, pierced his side with a spear, and immediately blood and water flowed out. This report is from an eyewitness giving an accurate account. He speaks the truth so that you also may continue to believe. These things happened in fulfillment of the Scriptures that say, "Not one of his bones will be broken," and they will look on the one they pierced. I'm sure you're familiar with this story, maybe not some of the details, but one of the most well-known facts about Jesus is his death, how he died on a cross. We know that Jesus gave many teachings, and perhaps you know some of them. Maybe you could name one. The parable of the Good Samaritan, for example, or Jesus did many miracles. Perhaps you could name one or two. He walked on water. He turned water into wine. But everyone knows how Jesus died. They know that he died on the cross. One of the most well-known symbols in American society is the cross. The cross is everywhere. Think about how many people wear crosses on necklaces, gold-plated jewelry crosses. They're hung in homes. You see them on bumper stickers. People get crosses tattooed on their arms. Doesn't it seem strange to you that the followers of a great moral teacher, a religious leader, would not just remember their leader's death, but celebrate it, venerate it, and even strangely trivialize it by putting crosses everywhere? Mahatma Gandhi didn't found a religion, but he certainly had many followers. Don't you think it would be a little bit strange for them to celebrate or venerate his death? Gandhi was martyred like Jesus. He was shot by a man with a pistol. Can you imagine Gandhi's followers wearing gold-plated pistols around their necks, or getting a pistol tattooed onto their forearm as some way to honor Gandhi? We would think that's ridiculous, sick, morbid. And yet, the followers of Jesus wear crosses, remember his death. A martyr's death can inspire his followers, but his followers don't celebrate his death. If Jesus' death was just a martyr's death, as many people believe, as Dr. Fears suggested, then why has his death and the way that he died become what's most important about his life?